On January 19, 2012, Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. By then, its market value had collapsed to below $100 million, down from roughly $31 billion about 15 years earlier. Its shares, once above $94, were trading around 30 cents. The company that had practically defined consumer photography was suddenly fighting for survival. But the real story did not begin in 2012. It began decades earlier, inside Kodak itself, because Kodak was not blindsided by the digital future. Kodak helped invent it. In 1975, Kodak engineer Steve Sasson built the first digital camera prototype. Management saw it. They understood what it meant, and yet Kodak stayed tied to film, the business that had made it rich. Sasson later said Kodak was still afraid of cannibalizing film. That fear did not just delay a product launch, it shaped the company's strategy for years. And that is what makes Kodak so important. This was not just a company that missed the future, it was a company that saw the future and kept choosing the past. And that decision would cost Kodak its dominance, its margins, and eventually its independence. To understand what happened, you have to understand what Kodak used to be. Kodak's roots go back to 1879, when George Eastman patented his plate coating machine, and by 1888, the company had launched the Kodak camera with a radically simple promise. You press the button, we do the rest. Photography stopped being a specialist craft and became a consumer habit. Kodak did not just sell film. It turned memory into a mass-market product. By 1976, Kodak accounted for about 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the United States. In 1988, it employed roughly 145,000 people. By the late 1990s, the company's market value had reached about $31 billion. This was not a niche manufacturer. This was one of the most powerful consumer brands in America. Even deep into the transition era, Kodak was still massive. Its 2004 sales were $13.5 billion. Its 2005 sales were $14.3 billion, and the brand meant more than revenue. Kodak was weddings, birthdays, vacations, family albums. An entire generation learned to think about memory through the phrase Kodak moment. That cultural power mattered, because Kodak's business was not just built on cameras. It was built on a system. Sell the camera, sell the film, sell the processing, sell the paper. Profit at every step. That system was elegant, it was scalable, and for a very long time, it looked untouchable, which is exactly why digital was so dangerous. But by the early 1980s, the cracks were already forming. The threat was not theoretical, it was technological. In 1981, Sony launched an electronic camera, sending what one Kodak case study described as fear through the company. Kodak had already built the first digital prototype in 1975, but it still did not move decisively into a mass-market digital business. Instead, it hesitated, experimented, and tried to protect the economics of film. That hesitation mattered because consumer behavior was changing. Photography was slowly moving from chemistry to electronics, from prints to screens, from consumables to devices, from recurring margins to lower margin hardware. Kodak did invest. In fact, by 1993, it had spent about $5 billion on digital imaging research, but the effort was fragmented across 23 separate digital scanner projects. That is a crucial detail. Kodak was not asleep, it was active, but activity is not the same as strategic alignment. There was another problem. Digital photography did not fit Kodak's old economics. Film was a beautiful business. High margins, recurring revenue, strong control over the value chain. Digital cameras were different. They were hardware heavy, competitive, and vulnerable to price pressure. Kodak eventually got products into the market. It launched the DC-20 in 1996 and made a bigger consumer push with EasyShare in 2001. For a while, it even succeeded commercially. During 2004 and 2005, Kodak held the leading market share in US digital camera sales. But success in units was not the same as success in profits, and that was the real pressure point. Kodak was trying to replace a rich legacy business with a thinner one, replace a controlled ecosystem with a brutal hardware market, replace chemistry margins with electronics margins. Leadership knew they had to do something. The question was, what? This is the most important part of the story, because Kodak did not fail because its executives were stupid. They failed because their logic made sense, right up until it did not. The decision was never just one dramatic meeting. It was a recurring executive choice, made in different forms over many years. Protect the film engine now. Enter digital carefully. Do not blow up the cash cow before the replacement is ready. On paper, that logic was rational. Reason 1. Film was still highly profitable. Why rush to replace a business that produced strong margins with a technology that, at first, looked inferior and uncertain? Early digital images were crude. Consumer demand was not fully developed, and the economics looked worse. Reason 2. Kodak believed it had time. It had the patents. It had the brand. It had the distribution. It had the labs. The assumption was simple. When digital became truly ready, Kodak could scale into it from a position of strength. Reason 3. Management feared cannibalization. This was not paranoia, it was arithmetic. Every digital sale risked weakening the film processing ecosystem that funded the company. Sasson later said Kodak was still afraid of cannibalizing film, and Reuters reported executives feared exactly that. So Kodak tried to manage the transition instead of owning it. It explored high-end niches first. It delayed broad consumer bets. It fragmented digital investment. It kept searching for hybrid models that could extend film rather than replace it. And when it finally pushed harder into digital cameras, it entered a market with weaker margins and rising Asian competition. Then came another strategic layer. Kodak's later leadership did move aggressively, but not always in the right direction. The company shut film plants and labs, cut deeply, monetized patents, and tried to reinvent itself around consumer inkjet printing. CEO Antonio Perez pursued a model with higher-priced printers and ink priced about 50% below competitors, betting that heavy users would switch. Analysts were skeptical. Kodak was trying to fund one transition while still paying for the collapse of the old one. That is the tragedy of Kodak. It was not denial in the lazy sense. It was a sequence of half-commitments. Not film, not fully digital, not fully platform, not fully services, not fully hardware. Just enough movement to feel responsive, not enough commitment to win. Because strategy rarely fails in PowerPoint. It fails when incentives, timing, and resource allocation stay tied to the old business. The consequences were measurable. Kodak's digital investments produced growth in volume, but the economics were ugly. According to Reuters, Kodak was losing about $60 on every digital camera sold by 2001. That is the kind of number that reveals the real problem. The company was participating in the future without extracting future-level profits from it. Then the $7 billion, already far below its scale in earlier years. In 2011, the company's preliminary presentation said revenue continued to be hurt by the continued decline in traditional film businesses. Then came bankruptcy. Reuters reported that Kodak entered Chapter 11 in January 2012 with a market value below $100 million and later described it as a $6.75 billion bankruptcy. By 2012, full-year sales dropped another 20% to $4.11 billion, and the company posted a $1.38 billion loss for the year. The market reaction was not just emotional, it was mathematical. A business built on recurring chemical profits had been replaced by low-margin electronics, patent monetization, and restructuring. What was meant to protect Kodak's legacy had instead weakened its ability to build a durable future. Kodak did eventually emerge from bankruptcy in September 2013, but as a much smaller company focused on commercial printing and imaging for business customers, not as the consumer photography giant it once was. That is the part many people miss. Kodak did not die because digital happened. Kodak died as the old Kodak because it never found a profitable, committed way to become the new one. So what went wrong? It came down to three things. Lesson 1. Protecting legacy profits is not the same as protecting the business. First, Kodak protected the economics of film longer than it protected its future position in imaging. That is a common corporate trap. Businesses often confuse today's margins with tomorrow's moat. Film looked more profitable than digital, so Kodak treated digital as a threat to manage rather than the new center of gravity to own. The result is that the company delayed the very self-disruption it needed. If a new model destroys your old margins but captures your customer, you do not actually have a choice. You either cannibalize yourself in a controlled way or get cannibalized by the market. Lesson 2. Strategy fails when incentives stay attached to the old engine. Second, Kodak had ideas. It had patents. It had engineers. It had early products. What it did not have was full organizational alignment behind the new model. Reuters reported tensions between digital and film staff, while digital investments were spread too broadly across projects. That is the classic sign of a company trying to preserve two incompatible systems at once. Strategy does not usually fail because leaders lack intelligence. It fails because incentives, metrics, and internal power stay anchored to the legacy business. Lesson 3. Timing matters more than being first, third. Invention alone is not enough. Kodak invented the first digital camera in 1975, but being early in technology is meaningless if you are late in business model commitment. Markets do not reward who sees the future first. They reward who reallocates capital, talent, and identity fast enough to meet it. Kodak had the insight. Competitors built the position. That is why timing and strategy is not just about launch date. It is about when you decide what business you are really in. On January 19th, 2012, Kodak's bankruptcy looked like the end of a photography company. But what really ended was something more specific. A business built to profit from film could not fully become a business built to lead digital, not because Kodak lacked invention, but because it kept trying to preserve the logic of the old model while entering the new one. In the end, the real cost was not just billions in value, it was the loss of strategic momentum. Because in business, one decision rarely kills a company, but one pattern of decisions can. If you do not disrupt yourself, someone else will.
So that's it. For more business stories, more hidden patterns, like and subscribe to The Firm Lore. And also, don't forget to let us know your opinions in the comment section.